Hello, this is Mystic Magic, and this is going to be the first deck review that I do. I'm going to be reviewing my own signature commander deck, my own signature commander, Psy, Master Thopterist. Got a nice foil of it there. Alright, the first thing I want to get into is why I actually chose Psy. I mean, I know a lot of people at my LGS will ask, hey, why'd you pick Psy? Why not Brea? Brea makes Thopters, or why didn't you pick Arkham Daxon? He's a better artifact commander. So the main reason I pick Psy is because of his first ability there. Whenever you cast an artifact spell, create a plus 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature token with flying. Now that leads to a lot of good things in an artifact deck. One of the cool things that happens is if you can play 0 mana artifacts, eggs, it's just a free Thopter, basically. Plus whatever that artifact does, of course. And another thing this deck likes to do is to use Thopters for utility purposes, such as tapping them for mana, sacrificing them to do things, which his second ability also is. It's 2 mana, 1 and a blue, sacrifice 2 artifacts to draw a card. Now this is also very useful with the Thopters, because if you just have a whole bunch of Thopters, you just refill your hand. It's just 2 mana to draw a card, essentially. Not to mention, he is a 3 mana 1/4, so you can get him down on turn 2 or 3 pretty easily, and he provides, he's a nice blocker in the early game when you don't really have too much out. Alright, so I've taken some time to organize it in categories. I got the lands here. I have the non-creature artifacts right here. Yes, that is a big pile. I have the spells over here. Have the creatures rather, artifact creatures included, and then I have the planeswalkers over here in this last stack. Alright, first thing I'm going to get into is the mana base. And like any good mono blue deck, this of course has islands, no surprise there, don't need to take any time. Temple of the False God, colorless mana, especially useful. Inventor's Fair. Now this also serves as a tutor for other artifacts. For instance, if you want to search for a big artifact creature or something, the ability is very easy to activate because you're almost always going to have 3 or more artifacts. And then Ancient Tomb, nice colorless mana. Myriad Landscape. I feel like this is an underplayed card because it's really good in monocolor decks because it's essentially 1 land to fish 2 out of your deck. It's basically just a 2-for-1. And it's only 2 mana to sacrifice, so you can do that pretty easily. Mikokoro, Center of the Sea, Temple Bell on a land, who wouldn't want that? Buried Ruin, sacrifice it, return an artifact card from your graveyard to your hand, pretty easy to see. Seed of the Synod, it's good for affinity, things like that. Arch of Erazka, also if you have a lot of permanents, it's really helpful if you need to draw some cards. Sanctum of Ugin. Sanctum of Ugin is whenever you cast a colorless spell with convert a mana cost 7 or greater, you can sacrifice it. If you do, search your library for a colorless creature card, reveal it, put it in your hand, shuffle. So this is really good. So basically, if you play a big, thick, like 7 mana colorless big boy, like for instance Darksteel Colossus over there, you can basically just fish another one out of your deck, and it's like a really good 2-for-1. Reliquary Tower, no max hand size. Helmer Depths. Tomb of the Spirit Dragon. Also, it doesn't see too much play. This is really good because if you have a lot of Thopters, you can actually start getting your life back up. Darksteel Citadel, also for affinity purposes, and for the occasional land board wipe, who knows. Foundry of the Consoles, it's just a mana sink late game if you want to get some more Thopters. Alright, now that we're done with that, we're going to move into the non-creature artifacts. Unwinding Clock, of course, this is a staple in any artifact deck. Untap all your artifacts during each other play's untap step. It's an artifact Seedborn Muse. Who wouldn't play this? Spellbook, because like I talked about, eggs, things like that, getting Thopters. No maximum hand size as well. Skull Clamp, sacrifice those Thopters for cards. Mishra's Bauble, again, it's an egg, it gets you card advantage. Ashnod's Altar. Ashnod's Altar is a really powerful card in this deck because what you can do is you can chain together artifact spells. So basically you cast an artifact spell, get a Thopter, sacrifice the Thopter for mana, use the mana to play another spell. The Immortal Sun, which actually has gone up a lot in price recently, is a really nice card in this deck because, well, of course, the first ability there, Players can activate Planeswalker loyalty abilities. I mean, and this deck doesn't have too many Planeswalkers in it, but that's still really nice. It just draws you an additional card, spells cost 1 less, and creatures get +1/+1, so if you want to hit someone with a horde of Thopters, that's also useful. This is just like a really good card for Commander in general, and I feel like it should be played in almost every deck. Also, it's an artifact, so it works well in this deck as well, particularly. Biden of Thassa, also a really, really good card. I like this card a lot because basically it lets you turn your Thopters into card advantage. You just hit someone with your Thopters and just draw cards. A lot of times if I have this card out, I won't do anything until I hit someone with my Thopters and draw cards, just so I can make sure I know all my options and what I could play this turn. Mindslaver. Mindslaver is a really fun card. There's actually a combo in this deck that one of my friends found with Mindslaver. No, it is not with Academy Runes. It is with Trading Post. Alright, so the two cards side by side. Mindslaver. 4 mana tap, sacrifice it. You control target player during the next turn. So basically you just steal their turn, do anything. And then with a Trading Post, it's the bottom ability that we're going to look at. All the other abilities are just great too. You can draw cards, do all sorts of things. The third ability. It's 1 tap, sacrifice a creature, return target artifact card from your graveyard to your hand. So the way this works is once you've used Mindslaver, you can pay for, tap this, return the Mindslaver to your hand. You do need to sacrifice a creature, but the best part about this is if you have Sai, once you play Mindslaver again, you get another Thopter, which you can just use to sacrifice to this. It's just a kind of a mean combo, but it's still fun nonetheless. Mana Vault, because of course you need all the mana you can get. Throne of the God Pharaoh. I don't actually see Throne of the God Pharaoh played too much either in EDH. It's a 2 mana legendary artifact that's already good because it gets you Thopters for a low amount of mana. It's at the beginning of your end step. Each opponent loses life equal to the number of tapped creatures you control. So basically, if you have Thopters, you attack with them, right, hit someone. Say you have 10 Thopters you attack someone with, your opponents will lose 10 life at the beginning of the next turn. Whisper Silk Cloak, because it's an artifact for one, it gives things Shroud and Unblockable. This is really good. I mostly just use this for Blightsteel Colossus in the deck. Blinkmouth Urn. At the beginning of each pre-combat main phase, if Blinkmouth Urn is untapped, that player adds 1 colorless to his or her mana pool for each artifact he or she controls. I love this card so much because it combos so well, especially with Mycosynth Lattice, because if everything is an artifact, then you can just create a whole bunch of colorless mana, which you could do everything with. Also, if you have a way to get Blinkmouth Urn tapped, your opponents won't be able to utilize this mana, because if you see it says if Blinkmouth Urn is untapped. Gilded Lotus, 5 mana, just to get a bunch of mana, just mana rock, nice. Lightning Greaves, of course, usual commander protection. Vidalcan Ori, you can cast spells of flash, commander staple. Nevin Rail's Discs, works very well with either Mycosynth Lattice or Darksteel Forge, or both, because with Mycosynth Lattice you can use this to blow up all permanents, because everything is an artifact and this destroys artifacts. And with Darksteel Forge, all of your artifacts have indestructible. So basically this is reusable because it doesn't sacrifice itself. Not to mention that all your stuff stays. And then of course Mycosynth Lattice I already talked about. It turns everything into an artifact and makes everything colorless and lets players spend mana as though it were any color. Crawl Space. This is actually really useful. It's a more recent addition to the deck. 3 mana artifact, already good. And no more than 2 creatures can attack you each combat. It's just some pillow forting for early game when you maybe don't have too much of a board state. Just want to keep that aggressive goblin deck off your back. And then Darksteel Forge, like I was talking about, one of the prime good cards in this deck. Artifacts you control have indestructible. I mean, who wouldn't like that? Thran Temporal Gateway. Again, this is one of the less played cards in EDH. It's a legendary artifact for 4. You can pay 4, tap it. You may put a historic permanent card from your hand onto the battlefield. This is good for actually quite a few reasons. For one, artifacts like this that cost 9 mana are really expensive, and since artifacts are historic, you can pay 4, tap it, put it onto the battlefield. Another thing that's good about this is that it doesn't say you can only activate it at any time you could activate a sorcery. So therefore, you can tap this at instant speed to put out any artifact from your hand. So one of the good things about this is that it's evasive to counter spells, so you can just play this on your opponent's end step and then move to your untap step and you already untap with it. Just avoid all the counter spells. Soul Ring, obviously. And that should be it for the non-creature artifact stack. Now we're going to move into the spells stack. And like any good mono blue deck, this deck has some counter spells. Dream Fracture. I actually like this counter spell. I don't see too many people play it. It's a counter target spell. Its controller draws a card, and so do you. So you just both get a card. I mean, it's nice because it gets you a card, but it also gives your opponent a card. I guess the opponent getting the card isn't too bad, but it's just nice if you need cards. Brainstorm, of course, draw 3 cards, put 2 back. Cyclonic Rift, just your usual board wipe in blue. All is Dust. All is Dust is actually a really good board wipe in this deck, because if you have a lot of artifacts, most of them will stay with All is Dust, because most of the stuff in here is colorless. And a lot of people just play colored permanents and don't have too many artifacts that actually matter. So you'll just be left with the big army while all your opponents sacrifice everything. Thoughtcast, it's a draw card spell with affinity. It will usually just end up costing 1 mana if you have enough artifacts. Counterspell, usually. Pact of Negation. Disallow, just good counterspell in general. Etherize, return all attacked creatures to their owner's hand, especially good against token decks. Just negate. Propaganda for some Pillow Fort. Stoic Rebuttal, it's a Metalcraft counterspell. It just turns into a normal counterspell if you have 3 or more artifacts. One with the Machine. I love this card so much. It's just because in the deck you're going to have a lot of high CMC artifacts. So if you need to refill your hand, you can end up drawing like 9, 11, 10, 12 cards. Just so many cards with this. Arcane Denial, of course. Reverse Engineer, again, another draw card spell that your artifacts can help with. Reality Shift, it's actually one of the only blue exile spells. It's just good to have that in there in case you need the backup against some scary threat. Whir of Invention, this is a really good card in the deck. It's a 3 blue X, Improvise. Search your library for an artifact card with CMC X or less, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle. And since you're going to have so many Thopters you're going to be creating with this deck, it's super easy to just grab like the biggest artifact in your deck with this. It's also instant speed, so you can do it at your opponent's end step and then untap with whatever that is. Mana Drain, obviously, because it's a counterspell. Oh, and the colorless mana helps more in this deck because it's mostly artifacts. And Dissipate. Counter target spell, it gets exiled. And now on to the creatures. We have Darksteel Colossus, just an 11/11 big boy. Platinum Empyrean, it's one of my other favorites to search out with tutors and things like that. Your life total can't change. Helps a lot against certain decks. And Blightsteel Colossus, one of my favorite cards in the entire deck. 12 mana for an artifact creature Golem, Trample, Infect. He is indestructible. If he would be put into a graveyard from anywhere, reveal it and shuffle it into its owner's library. This guy is just amazing. He's one of the main win cons of the deck. He's mostly the main target of all the tutors in this deck. He's what I put in Whisper Silk Cloak for. He's just the one-shot robot. Treasure Mage, because he searches for Blightsteel and other cards. You may search your library for an artifact card with CMC 6 or greater. Chief of the Foundry, to buff all of your Thopters. Thopter Assembly. One of the things I like about this is that if I sacrifice all of my Thopters to side to draw cards, this will bounce to my hand and get more Thopters. Mirror Retriever, for if you need to dig something out of the graveyard. Shimmer Mirror, to let you play artifacts at instant speed. Broodstar. Okay, I don't actually see very many artifact decks playing Broodstar, and I feel like they should. It's affinity for artifacts flying, XX. Its power and toughness is equal to the number of artifacts you control. I can usually play this card for 2 mana and have it come out as a 12/12 flyer. That on its own is just so good. It's also a good target for a removal spell, so if you just need a bait out of removal, it's great. Ethereum Sculptor. It is an artifact itself that makes artifact spells cost 1 less. Scrap Trawler. So if a big threat thing or something else that you have dies, you can return another artifact to your hand. It just helps you keep things in your hand and keep artifacts cycling through the graveyard. It's just great. Ornithopter, just 0 mana egg. Whirler Rogue. This creates 2 Thopters when it comes in, but the thing I like about this is that tap 2 artifacts, target creature can't be blocked. I use this a lot with Blightsteel, or if I just need to get in the final finishing blows. Vidalcan Engineer, because it ramps you, taps for 2 mana of any color to spend on artifact spells. Steel Hellkite, because it's a 5/5 flyer, pay 2, get +1/+0. And you can pay X to destroy each non-land permanent with converted mana cost X, whose controller was dealt damage by Steel Hellkite this turn. Activate this ability only once each turn. This is really good to use against token decks, because if you smack them and then pay 0, it just wipes out all the tokens. Or basically, if they have anything pesky, this just takes care of it immediately. It can put people behind in the game and they just can't catch up. Solemn Simulacrum, because it is a commander staple. One of the things I actually like to do with this is sacrifice this and a Thopter to Sai, so then you draw 2 cards. Golgotha Forge Master. This is tap, sacrifice 3 artifacts, search your library for an artifact card, put it onto the battlefield, and shuffle your library. I sacrifice Thopters to this and just use it to grab whatever I want to advance my position in the game. Mycosynth Golem. This is actually one of the newer additions to the deck. It's 11 mana for an artifact creature Golem. Affinity for artifacts, so it costs 1 less to play for each artifact you control. That's why it's 11 mana. So if you have enough Thopters out, which you pretty much always will, this can end up just costing 0 and just playing it for free. And then artifact spells you play have affinity for artifacts. So basically, this just lets you play whatever artifact creatures you have in your hand, because they all have affinity. Sharding Sphinx. Flying. Whenever an artifact creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you may put 1/1 blue Thopter artifact creature token with flying into play. This basically works with you hit them with a Thopter, then you create another Thopter. So it just keeps doubling and doubling, and you can get as many as you want. Duplicant. 6 mana artifact creature, exile something. Again, blue doesn't have too many removal spells, so this is a good card. Master of Ethereum. It can just become a big beater that draws removal spells, and it buffs your Thopters and other artifact creatures. Master Transmuter. 1 blue tap, return an artifact you control to its owner's hand. You may put an artifact card from your hand into play. It's a 1/2. What I usually do with this is return a Thopter to my hand to put out any big threat, for instance, like Blightsteel Colossus or Darksteel Forge or anything. It just lets you cheat out stuff more easily. We have Grand Architect, again another one of the favorites for this deck. Other blue creatures you control get +1/+1. 1 blue, target artifact creature becomes blue until end of turn. Tap and untap blue creature you control. Add 2 mana to your mana pool, spend this only to cast artifact spells or activate artifact abilities. I use this to just be able to cheat out things more easily, tap things for artifact mana, and another good thing is that your commander is blue, so you can also tap him for artifact mana. And last but not least, Chief Engineer. Artifact spells you cast have Convoke. Again, a very good card for cheating things out. You can just tap Thopters for mana for whatever artifacts you want. And now for the last category. We have the Planeswalkers, which isn't too many. First, I have Tezzeret the Seeker, +1, untap up to 2 artifacts. -X, search your library for an artifact card with converted mana cost X or less and put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle. And -5, artifacts you control become 5/5 artifact creatures until end of turn. I usually use him for the -X to just grab something out of my deck if needed. The +1 can also be useful if I have mana rocks. Then I have Tezzeret, Artifice Master from M19. What I usually use with him is the 0. It's just draw 2 cards on every turn. It's just so useful. Also, he can help replenish your board state with his +1 if needed. And then I have Karn the Great Creator from the newest War of the Spark set. Activated abilities of artifacts your opponents control can't be activated. +1 until end of turn, up to 1 target non-creature artifact becomes an artifact creature with power and toughness equal to its converted mana cost. What I usually use him for is to either animate some big non-creature artifacts such as Darksteel Forge or anything, or use his -2. You may choose an artifact card you own from outside the game or an exile, reveal that card, and put it in your hand. I use his -2 to grab Mycosynth Lattice out of the sideboard. It is a dirty combo, but it is a very good win condition. So basically, Mycosynth Lattice turns all permanents into artifacts, and Karn's static ability says that activated abilities of artifacts your opponents control can't be activated, so they cannot tap lands. It's just another dirty win condition I added in there for funsies. Alright, and that should be the deck. I will put the link for this deck in the description of the deck. It will be on Tapped Out, and I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please share, just let other people know about my channel, and have a good one.